when you can do that, then you understand all of the levers that they have to pull to make the cash machine go.
Yeah.
Was that a cash machine? It sounded like a
That sounds
kitten.
more like a bird doing a cash machine impression.
First of all.
Welcome to the Rich and Regular Podcast, where we explore life at the intersection of money. I'm Julien.
And I'm Kiersten, and today's episode is another quick dip. This is an episode where we explore 3 different topics, and today's topics are, is cord cutting still worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Social Security, cost of living updates, and then just a general quick check-in on how the stock market is doing.
Yeah.
So the reminder of the quick dip format for those of you who maybe missed the last one or are new to the podcast, it's something we're experimenting with. Normally we take like a deep dive on different topics, like a singular issue, a singular topic. This time we're just going to settle for some shallow takes. These are short takes on big ideas, and we're going to try to do a better job of the short part.
Yeah.
Last time we got carried away and almost did like 3 different podcast episodes in one.
Because I think we're so accustomed to like going deep into certain topics. And so it was kind of hard to like realize that you really only have about 7 to 10 minutes. And so with that said, I'm going to be a good example and jump right into the first topic of conversation, which is whether or not cord cutting is still worth it. I do want to veer left for a second though, because
see, here you go.
Well, I'm kind of setting the stage a little bit.
Going to the deep end.
Because I'm an OG cord cutter. I want to talk a little bit about why this is a topic of conversation. And I think primarily because I believe it's one of those things that's so widely overlooked. Like I now am really shocked when I meet people who've never even considered it. I walked away a few years ago thinking that this was a topic that everyone was at this point generally aware of, open to it, but then made a decision not to do it. But now what I'm seeing and hearing is a lot of conversation about whether or not it's not even worth it because there's so much publicity around streaming platforms raising their prices. And so a lot of people, I think, are basically throwing the baby out with the bathwater as a whole. But I think they're kind of still missing the broader point and certainly missing a savings opportunity here. But I've been cutting, I cut the cord, I want to say maybe like 2000. I mean, it sounds crazy.
It was before you met me. You didn't have no cable. I want to say
it was around 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was in part because I just wanted to save money, but it was also just like a lifestyle change where I just did not want to be so chained to the television and programming. And I think I was also just over the overdose of commercials. And I think I can only imagine it's still pretty bad in streaming, but it's just a lot. So anytime I'm in a hotel and I'm watching regular television, and you know this for a fact, I always say, I cannot believe people do this. I can't believe they watch.
So many commercials.
There's so many commercials. I can't do it.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had cut the cord by the time that we met. And I still had cable because the apartment that I was living in actually combined the cable with the rent payment. So I didn't have a separate bill. So I had all the channels. I mean, anything I didn't have, I would just go to my parents' house because they had like all the channels plus.
Oh, they probably still have all the channels.
They do. They one of the people that got
super duper package. All the channels.
All the channels.
You be on channel 635. You'd be like, I didn't even know they had 15 versions of ESPN.
So when I was moving in with you, after we were engaged and all that jazz, I was down to live in a cableless house, but I did have some conditions. One was that we had to replace the TV.
We don't got to talk about the TV.
TV had a big booty in the back. We had to replace the TV. And at the time, you had the wired antennas.
I did.
And I wanted us to get the nicer over-air antenna, like the flat one that goes on the wall, the flat white one.
That's what I had.
No, you had them bunny ears.
I never had bunny ears.
You had bunny ears, bro. You had bunny ears.
See, this is
And then the third thing, we had to get an Apple TV. Like, I wanted a device. This was before TVs were smart, and you had to, like, buy the piece to make it smart.
Yeah.
But I really am excited about this topic because when your mom moved recently, like a couple of months ago, I actually had to set up her cable. And I was really surprised about the process and how it works now.
It's different now, yeah.
Yeah. They still have bundled services, but if you just wanted cable, like if you just tried to get cable, it's actually more expensive than if you bundle it with internet or landline, right? So they've made it so that they're basically giving away internet and landline because they can still offer discounts on those programs versus cable. Because of broadcast television being so expensive, they can't really discount cable. All they can do is get you to buy into something else, and that helps offset the cost. But what was interesting is that your mom had gone without cable. We had convinced her to cord cut, but she was fiending.
She couldn't do it.
She was fiending. She wanted her TV back. She needed the background noise. And because she had this list of channels, this list of must-have channels, the two channels that she had on her must-have list, ESPN and MSNBC, added an extra $60 to the bill. So she could have got basic cable. She could have got basic plus cable. But because she wanted them two channels, it put her in like the basic plus, like the premium cable without like Showtime, HBO. And it was like $60 just because she wanted to watch ESPN and MSNBC.
Yeah. No, this is totally normal. We wanted to, as we were preparing for this conversation, I had a bunch of notes around how much things were costing these days. And Kiersten was like, it's too long. So she let me cut it all. But long story short, it is not more expensive, and it is not just about the same. So if you're hearing anyone saying that it is just about the same, meaning the price of a general or basic cable package is just about the same once you stitch together a few streaming packages, it is not. It is still roughly around a third or a half. Now, if you are talking about getting the premium level version of Netflix, Hulu, everything you can imagine, plus no ads, plus, and you want every new thing, well, sure. After a while, you're certainly going to add up to just about being the same amount, if not more, than cable. But generally speaking, to answer that question, it is still significantly cheaper to stream. But to your point, unlike my mom, you have to be willing to just say no to a couple of things and say, you know what, I don't want to do these things. So a couple of things that I want to say have also changed over the last couple of years. Netflix, for sure. Like they came out swinging. They got tired of, I guess, being taken advantage of. People sharing passwords with family and friends, or
you can't do that no more.
Exes still, being your account, using your Netflix.
They got tired of that. Landlord.
Exactly. So they started paying attention to that. And basically, I think they have pricing tiers now where if you want to share it with X amount of people, it's going to cost you a little bit more per person. Amazon also showed up. I mean, gosh, in the beginning of the streaming wars, they were not a player at all. And I want to say even when they first started with Amazon Prime Video, it was pretty bad.
It was
pretty bad. I mean, the way people talk about Tubi, it was really bad Tubi back in the day. But that has since changed. They've invested and thrown billions.
Bezos brought a bag.
Oh, man, he really, really did.
Yeah.
And so they've got their own really, really special lineup there. Disney Plus has come in and they brought in some really, really great stuff. Apple TV, that was another one that started out a little rocky, and they've done a really, really great job also expanding into sports. I would also say now, one of the things that I've noticed, because I know sports is the big issue for a lot of people, but as an HBO fan, HBO has started to incorporate certain sports shows and series into the package there as well. And so all of that to say, it is no longer a story of, well, what about sports? And therefore, since there isn't a perfect solution for sports, I'm just going to go ahead and buy into the major package. That is not the case. You can still kind of stitch certain things together despite all of these other things that you might be hearing around. But short answer is yes. It is still significantly less expensive. Free trial is still your friend. If you are truly, truly a sports lover, I still think pound for pound, a streaming platform like YouTube TV is worth looking at and has a likelihood of being significantly less expensive, even when we're just looking at the cost of the service. But the fact that you're not going to have all of the rental fees and the installation fees and any of those kinds of delays, like if you have internet service that can suffice and manage streaming, then I think you owe it to yourself to just go ahead and save a little bit of money. You can still it's like watching cable, really, but you're just doing it through the internet. And you're not having to have this really crazy relationship with like the cable companies, which
under contract
historically have just been almost as bad as the fitness industry.
I agree. I think the streaming wars has changed the game on cord cutting, which used to be fairly simple. You would cut the cord and you tell people like, yeah, you don't have live TV, but you've got Netflix and Hulu, so you can still catch up on your favorite shows. Now it's a lot more complex. I agree. I think it's still worth it just because you have more options and you have the ability to filter and watch things on your own time. But my advice has definitely changed. At the beginning, it was just sign up for this, go ahead and pay it, like go for it. And now it's more like, I mean, do some free trials, like you said, like experiment, figure out what you like. If you have a family member or a friend that still has a traditional cable package, see if they're willing to share their password with you, because you can get access to different networks, apps, or different channels apps using their password and their provider's password. I would also tell people to just be cautious of internet speeds, because you don't want to reduce your cable bill, but then jack up your internet bill because you've added all of these devices and they all require bandwidth.
Yeah.
You may need to take it up a little bit, but don't just naturally default to the highest plan. Start with something cheaper and then see how that goes, and then go a little bit higher. And then the last thing that I would add is around the devices themselves. Like before, you used to need Apple TV or a Prime Fire Stick or what's the other one?
Roku.
A Roku, yeah. We only have Apple TVs and Fire Sticks in this house. But most TVs are actually smart now. You don't need an external device because it's already built in.
Yep.
If you want to get an external device, that's fine. I would just say don't aim for the cheapest one just because you get it. Like, try to get a device that has multiple functions, whether it's streaming in 4K or the ability to connect to Wi-Fi. That's not a good example, but try to get something that has multiple functions, or even like part of an ecosystem that you already belong to. So the Fire Stick will work with your Alexa or your Amazon, Apple TV. You belong to the Apple ecosystem. You can take advantage of Apple Arcade like we do, or Apple TV Plus.
Yep.
Just make sure that you try to double dip to get the most out of these devices.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't plan on talking about it, but the last thing I'll say is really around that interface too. Like, having tried several of them throughout the year, because, like, I'll just be honest, when I want to watch something like the NBA Finals or something like that, I go ahead and I get a little free trial, or I just buy the month for YouTube TV, and there I am, and I can watch the finals.
And then cancel that month.
And then I just cancel it, and I'm done with it. But I think that is still very much at play. Or if you're having company over or family and they're coming to stay with you and you don't normally have those things, you don't need to hold them hostage to your frugality. You know what I mean? Like, if they're a big fan of whatever it is and you want to host them a little bit more comfortably, they don't need to not want to stay with you because you don't have cable. Right?
But at the same time, tell them to bring their password.
You can also do that.
It carries with you.
Absolutely. So. But the point I was going to make is around interface. Like, the interfaces matter a little bit, right? Like, my preference actually is Hulu Live TV. I kind of just enjoyed that interface a little bit more than the YouTube TV Premium or whatever it was called. I just thought it was a little funky, a little hard to navigate, hard to figure out. But all that to say, you can try them. You can do a free trial. It is worth giving a shot, but do not buy into the hype that it is basically cost neutral, because it still isn't. You have an opportunity to save some money. It may not be as much as it was back in the day when it was like almost a $50 savings. But I think if you cut back a little bit, you can certainly save a little bit by still deciding to cut the cord.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at it on an annual basis.
For sure.
Because you can rotate, because you can pause, cancel, start up, get the offer from Google Play or from Verizon.
Yep.
You can mix and match how you fund, how you create your streaming library.
That's it.
All right. That was the first topic.
All right.
We got a little wordy, but we're going to do all right.
Well, maybe if you don't come at me from a TV this time, you might.
Well, this was about Social Security, and more specifically about the cost of living update.
All right, let's do it.
So every year, the Social Security Administration announces a cost of living increase for the 72-ish million people who are dependent on Social Security checks. Now, a lot of people think this is just retirees, but it's not. It could be retirees, people who are disabled, children, all kinds of different situations are dependent on Social Security checks.
Yep.
Now, this year's was just announced like last week, and it's a 2.5% raise, 2.5% cost of living increase. And it's intended to help solve for the rising costs of food, gas, and other goods and services. Now, the average recipient of a Social Security check is going to see about $50 more every month, but it's smaller than the 3.2-ish% that they got last year.
Yep.
And it's much smaller than the record 8.7% that they got in 2023,
Yep.
or even the 5.9% that they got in 2022.
Yeah, which were like a direct response to like the hyperinflationary environments that we were experiencing back then. I mean,
but it feels like it's not enough. And a lot of people are saying that it's not enough, which is common. We did an episode on debunking retirement myths a while ago. And we talked about how if you add up all of your Social Security checks, which you can go on Social Security's website and see what your anticipated check is going to be in advance. If you add it up, it's likely not enough to cover all of your living expenses. And that gap has to come from somewhere else. But even when there aren't periods of record inflation like we've seen in the last couple of years, you'll often find that the cost of living adjustment that Social Security makes is offset or quickly erased by an increase in Medicare or some other type of budget category. So you really have to be prepared. And I think this is one of the purest versions of our mission, which is to inspire better conversations about money. Because people assume that when their income is fixed, their expenses are going to be reasonably fixed as well. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the case. And so when you're checking in with your loved ones, whether it's older people in your lives or parents in your lives, it's not enough to just ask them how they're doing or did their check come in. You really got to get down to the category level and make sure that you're getting specific about their expenses. When they start complaining about things being more expensive or the price changing on something or their pharmacy asking for more money on this, that, and the other, I understand why we, can tune some of that stuff out because there's a lot of gripes, but at the same time, that stuff compounds. And when the 2.5% that you get additional for the year, it doesn't cover it, it creates an issue.
Yeah, Social Security by far is one of the most overlooked aspects of personal finance. And I think really it requires people who are caretakers and intimately involved with the lives of the elder or the person that they are caring for before one really starts to actually understand these things. And I'll say we're just as guilty as that as well. Yeah. Like it really wasn't until we became much more focused on helping to ensure that my mother could land on, solid ground and like really started looking at the numbers and really helping her out there that we started to explore the subject in greater detail. And so that's one of the other reasons why we wanted to keep on talking about this, because again, people get hit with it and then all of a sudden they're forced to kind of start from scratch and try to figure out how it all works. And then as a result, like try to make the most of whatever situation they're stuck in, because so many people just kind of take like blanket advice and run with that. And that becomes like the thing that sets the tone, unfortunately, for a really, really long time, maybe even for as long as that person continues to live, because they just like were making a decision based off of bad information. So this raise, first of all, because I know the last time we even mentioned Social Security, at least one person commented on, I believe it was a YouTube video saying, not gonna lie, like I didn't even know that there were adjustments. Like most people just believe this is the number, this is how much that you get, and this is the number that you're gonna get until you no longer qualify. They do have annual adjustments. It's called a cost of living adjustment, COLA. And the way that they base that is from data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they use the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which is the general index that's used for a lot of things. This is the metric that the government uses to get a general sense of like how expensive or how costly certain goods are in the marketplace, so that they have an idea of how much they need to adjust those payments to further extend the support that they're offering to the people who are doing it. Now, it's an imperfect science, for sure.
It's an average basket of goods.
It's an average, right? Which means there are always going to be some people who benefit from that, and there will be a significant percentage of people who gripe and say it's not nearly enough because where I am, this is how much things cost, and I get it that you're lumping me in with all of these other low-cost areas, but it's not enough where I am.
Yeah, your spending changes as your life changes, and the average basket for a consumer is not the same thing that elderly people spend their money on, right? Their spending patterns of the elderly are in healthcare and food and
prescription drugs.
For prescription drugs.
And the cost of those things fluctuate, and that can really, really create like some short-term pressure on people's finances. And so there are considered efforts to try to use basically elder indexes in addition to CPI or other combinations of those things, but we're not quite there yet. Welcome to America. And so, in the absence of a solution, obviously, this is where just more hands on, practice comes into place. And so, if we're looking for places to cut down, obviously, food is a big one of them. Don't shy away from looking or exploring local pantries. Again, you
Yes.
might feel like this is something that is extreme. But again, it's not until you're forced to deal with someone who is in these situations that you realize that actually, like, this is why these organizations are there. I have family members who regularly take part in these things, and their feedback has always been how surprised they are at the quality, because there's this perception that food banks or these communities or these community freezers or whatever it is, that it's just like junk and crap. Actually, like, there's a lot of really, really good stuff. Now, if you have specialty needs, you're likely it's going to be difficult for you to find those things, maybe. But I think for most people, like, just don't flat out ignore them or rule them out as a possibility, because in situations like this, they can actually become really, really helpful and still be the kind of support that allows a family member or a loved one to still get the support that they need while
Yeah.
maintaining their dignity. And I
Even if you
think,
have specialty needs, like don't be afraid to talk to the organizers of that food bank,
correct.
pantry, community freezer, because they can put out feelers to their vendors and resources to say, hey, we have someone who has a gluten allergy. If you
Yes.
could try really hard to send and
Yeah.
donate
They
that.
send out a different note
Yeah.
to the community and say, hey, if anyone has these things, we have a specific need for these kinds of things. And you'd be surprised that problem can be solved relatively quickly. And the same item that you can see on the shelves in a store that would have cost you $20, $30 or something like
Mhm.
that, that is too expensive and out of reach, is now suddenly made available to you out of the goodness of other people's hearts. And so
Mhm.
I'm sharing that as something just to remind people, like, don't wait until you absolutely hit rock bottom to start leveraging these kinds of resources. And I'll also say, in the spirit of election season, this is just another reason why you really want to pay attention, not just to the presidential election, but also who the state and local and state senator
Mhm.
government officials or elected officials are, because those are the people who are much more likely to have a policy or a proposal that will directly affect the levels of support that your family members get. And so all of that combined, I think, is one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we kind of talked about that right now.
And I would say for healthcare and medicine costs, which is another place where seniors and people who rely on our system are seeing huge increases in costs, just remember that Medicare functions like a traditional health insurance plan. That means that some things are covered by them and other things are not.
Yep.
There's also not just one Medicare. There are 4 different parts and a supplemental program. I'm actually going to drop a link in the description with a helpful guide that was put together by Nuveen. But again, it's worth talking to your loved ones if they're on Medicare to understand what they're paying out of pocket and to see if there are more affordable options in the area, because they may not know. They may not know that the doctor that they used to go to has stopped taking Medicare. Maybe
Yeah.
they were told, but they already had an appointment. Whatever it is, it's always little stuff. Just make sure that they understand what fully comes with the program, because I know, like, even with my parents, they get a voucher from Medicare.
Mhm.
They're retired, they get a voucher, and helping direct them on what to spend that on versus just buying up more Band-Aids. Or my mama bought a Fitbit with hers a couple of years ago and then gave it to me. Like, helping direct them on actually using that voucher to lower the cost of the things that they need instead of seeing it as like a gift card. It's a conversation that a lot of people don't think is worth having.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say is to research drug voucher programs in your area and even encourage your parents or loved ones to ask doctors if there's a generic version of their medication. Even if you've tried this before, like, go back and try again. Because to your point about politics, the Biden administration has really made a lot of progress, a lot of regulatory pressure on both capping the costs of certain prescription drugs.
Yep.
So making sure that it's not more than, say, $35 or $25, whatever it is. And CVS and Walgreens have announced new programs that are designed to reduce prescription drug prices for a lot of patients. And this is in direct response to the company that Mark Cuban started. Like, there's just a lot of pressure to bring down prescription, and it creates a sense of competition, especially for these large drug chains that are struggling with their retail locations for whatever reason they say, whether it's robberies and theft or if it's just poor management. They're all responding and trying to keep the pharmacy business alive. And so even if you've done this work before, you tried, you was on hold for a long time, only be told no, I'm telling you, it's worth giving it a shot in the next couple of months because a lot has changed in the legalized drug business.
Yes. So shout out to Uncle Joe. Shout out to former Shark now, Mark Cuban. For the work that he's doing with, I believe it's called Cost Plus Drugs. Don't quote me on that. I remember
I meant to write it down.
It sounded like the old Cost Plus World Market brand, but I know it wasn't that. I think that's the only reason why I remember
it. Might be Cost R. We'll drop the link.
It's something like that. And also shout out to everyone who's also exploring medical tourism, right? This is something that I think can also be very useful in moments like this. I know we did an episode about it at least a year ago. Hopefully we remember to link to it. It was a while ago, but the people who are savvy enough and smart enough and courageous and willing to say, you know what, I'm just going to go to Mexico and get that knee replaced where I can do it for a solid, $1,500. Don't quote me on that. I'm just making up the numbers, but we did give hard numbers in that episode. But you would be wildly surprised at how much less expensive and enjoyable the experience is. So again, this is the reality that a lot of us are being faced with. If that 2.5% or whatever that, cost of living adjustment isn't enough, like we got to start getting creative. And hopefully this offers up a few other solutions that you all can explore as you are continuing on your journey of being a caretaker. God bless you, because we know it's hard. Number 3, how are we doing on time?
Good.
All right. Number 3. Let's talk a little bit about the stock market. We've done full episodes on the stock market before, but I wanted to make sure that we dropped in and did a little quick pulse check here because it's Q4. And I think the last time we even were mentioning Q4, it was from a standpoint of like corporations doing what corporations do. And
they still are.
They still are, right? And, and they're going to do whatever they can to get this last push. This is earnings season. This is the last push to attempt to hit the forecasted numbers that they stated that they were going to do in the beginning of the year. All cards are likely on the table. We know that oftentimes this leads to layoffs. This leads to big pushes. We know this oftentimes leads to really big creative Black Friday sales, but this is basically where the profit for the year is made. And as a result, as an investor now, putting that hat on, it can lead to a really, really exciting time. It can also be a very volatile time because companies are, much more willing to get creative and try some things that they likely never have tried before because they really, really want to make sure that they hit those numbers. But if you are an investor, I want to talk a little bit about 2024 and what the year has been doing with respect to the stock market. And so I'm just going to use a general index here, S&P 500. Year to date, the S&P 500 is up 19.13%. This is as of October 18th, which is the date that we're recording this podcast. So just a few days
telling all our business
before it comes out. It's a quick dip, It's a quick dip. This is exactly why we do it, right? It's kind of still very, very fresh. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a little bit more meaningful. But what that means is, what that 19.13% means is if you'd invested, let's say, $1,000 in the beginning of the year, that right around now, you'd have about $1,191. If you'd invested $10,000, you'd have around $11,900. If you had $500,000 working for you in something like an S&P 500 index fund, you would be right about now, that portfolio would have around $595,000. That's my favorite because it's like having a six-figure employee. Right? It's like looking at your portfolio as having a six-figure passively earned employee, which I would say for most people is a pretty good feeling. For those of us who are, what's the word I'm looking for? Privileged enough to be able to say that and to have that. I think that's one of the perks of being a long-term investor. And again, that's just like year to date. Like not even full year. Like we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe things goes up, maybe it goes down. But like so far, so freaking good. Like, that's not bad at all. I don't know very many people that would be complaining about that, except for a lot of the individual stockholders who have
Well, not
disproportionate
all of them. Some of
portfolios.
them individual
Not
stocks
all.
have been busting this year.
Yeah,
Like there are a lot of happy stockholders out there.
for sure.
But the reality is this is what we mean by financial independence, regardless of what definition or version you want to lean into. It's this idea that your money grows at a faster rate than your burn.
And works more efficiently than you, right?
Exactly.
Like there are so many people out there right now who are aspiring to earn $95,000 a year. And there are several people, millionaires and even half a millionaires, who have that money working for them in the stock market that earn that passively through likely one of the simplest, most efficient investments that they could ever have. And it probably cost them around less than 25 cents
Yeah.
annually.
Yeah.
To make and purchase and manage that investment. That's what wealth building looks like. You can't compete with that as an active worker.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't, right? You can't work 25, you can't put in 25 cents worth of work and have anything spit out $95,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the places where this growth is coming from, and it's interesting that you frame it up that way, because a lot of the headlines these days are like, man, the economy's booming, but what goes up must come down. Like, a lot of them have this hedge factor. And that's mostly because over the summer, everybody was calling for recessions and bear markets. And now it's kind of like, we were wrong, but we're not going to be wrong forever. So let me just remind you that things can't continue to go up forever.
Right.
But at the same time, the sectors that are contributing to the market's performance are things that have longevity baked in. It's sectors like technology, which has continued to be a major force. We talked about Netflix. They just announced an incredible earnings report. They have record members. They have huge profit margins. Tesla bounced back. Amazon, Google, like all these companies have plans that they're working, and they don't really see an end to the growth, right? Like Meta is willing to fire as many people as it requires to continue to deliver profit to shareholders.
And they just did.
They will continue to. Mm-hmm. This is what we're saying. The healthcare sector is another one. They've seen steady growth, which is mostly driven by aging population and raising the prices on drugs and increased demand for medical services. So exactly what we just talked about. That's driving the healthcare industry stock. Essential goods and services, food, beverages, all that stuff. Like, it's things that Americans have baked into their everyday life. And so this idea that it just stops abruptly is one that you can be a little skeptical of. Like, will it continue to grow at 20-something% every year? No. Like, you need to do your own research, make sure that you're not blinded or distracted by inflammatory headlines. The idea is the sole purpose of a company is to make money. That's the only reason they exist.
And they do it really well.
Mm-hmm. You just have to stop looking at it as an employee and actually take on the lens of an investor. When you can do that, then you can understand all of the levers that they have to pull to make the cash machine go.
Yeah.
Was that a cash machine? It sounded like a
That sounds
kitten.
More like a bird doing a cash machine impression.
First of all, y'all know what I meant. Y'all know what a cash machine. I'm gonna edit it. I'm gonna put one in.
You're gonna have to. I took a jab at our individual stockholders because we're not big fans of individual stockholding, but we do have a few holdings. I don't know that we can have a conversation about the stock market and technology without shouting out NVIDIA. This is likely one of the craziest runs I ever seen. Mm-hmm. I'm only 44 years old, so I ain't been around the block that many times, but I can remember that there are really just a handful of darlings that I can really think of, and NVIDIA is one that I think is crazy. I mean, year to date, that stock is up 186%. If you zoom out a little bit and go to a 5-year return, if you invested 5 years ago, you'd be up 2,797%. What that means is if you'd invested $10,000 on January 1st today in October, you'd have earned $18,600 in interest above and beyond your $10,000 initial investment. If you invested $10,000 5 years ago in NVIDIA stock, today you'd have earned $279,700 in interest, basically turning a $10,000 investment into just shy of $300,000.
Yeah, imagine if you worked there.
That's through the pandemic, right? If you work there, you likely may have even gotten
decamillionaire.
Stock options or some
yeah.
other perks, right? Same thing has happened with several other tech companies and people who've been employed in these very lucrative opportunities. But I would also caution you. I hate to end on that note, right? But I would also caution you because to that point, what goes up does come down. I don't know when. I'm not paid enough to even know when, and I really don't even care. But I would say talk to a Zoom employee and do some research on Zoom. They are a fantastic example of the bottom that's completely falling out. Now, it doesn't mean a company goes out of business. But if you have a disproportionate percentage of your wealth tied up in those individual holdings, you are unfortunately participating in some fairly risky behavior. And so you want to make sure that you are diversified. You want to make sure that you are prepared for those kinds of bumps and that you have an exit strategy so that you aren't left hanging or left not paying attention and unable to make a move to ensure that you can at least stop the bleeding while you start to feel like things are going south. But all that to say, for all the investors out there, certainly those who made a move a year ago and decided to put some money in, I can assure you, you're feeling good about that decision now. So congratulations to you. For all the people who invested in really anything, if you just kept it simple 5 years ago, I mean, we've been doing this a significantly longer time. You probably feel really, really good about yourself. And so kudos to you guys. I know at the time, it was likely a very scary and confusing decision, but pat yourself on the back for hanging in there and enjoying this magnificent bull run that we have all experienced. If you've been investing for longer than that, go ahead and
cash out.
Cash out, man.
I mean, not literally.
Not literally.
Like,
no, I mean, let it ride. Have
metaphorically.
Fun. But spread
whatever you're doing with your days.
Spread the wealth, spread the joy, enjoy it. This is an incredible, incredible opportunity. If you're on the outside looking in, let this be not a warning, but let this be some inspiration that, hey, man, you're missing out. And you can start small. We've spoken on several occasions about ways to do that. You can start passively. You can start simply. You can start automatically using AI. There really is no excuse, I think. But I can't think of anyone who would reasonably listen to our podcast, watch some of the things that we've done on YouTube or have followed our journey and not be intrigued and say, you know what, I'm not going to let another year or another 5 years go by. Like the learning is enough. If you still want to learn some more, hopefully you got 5 more hours in you. We developed our Making Money Grow class if you really just want to get down into it. But we talk about all this stuff in that class. And so you can demystify it, dedicate 5 years of your life, and hopefully 5 years from now, you'll be looking back and you'll have comparable numbers, just like we've been sharing about the S&P or individual stocks or sectors, whatever it is that you're interested in. And you'll have a good story to tell. And you'll be saying it from a place of comfort instead of a place of fear and concern and being worried about the next layoff.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the Rich and Regular podcast. If you like what you heard, go on and take a quick dip over to the ratings and review page and leave us a 5-star rating review or drop a comment below and we'll keep the conversation going. If there are any topics you want us to cover on the next quick dip, let us know and we will see y'all next week.